Ow! Today we're going to be talking about time-based effects, specifically delay and reverb, basics of them, how they work, what they are. Let's just get into it. What is reverb exactly? Reverberation is a persistence of sound after that sound is produced. A reverberation is created when a signal is reflected, causing numerous reflections to build up and then decay as the sound is absorbed by the surfaces of objects in space. So basically, if you were in a big empty room and you go wah, and you kind of hear the persistence of that sound, that's reverb. What? That's crazy. There are a few types of reverb that aim to capture specific kinds of styles of sound. There's a spring reverb. It's a pretty simple reverb audio effect. It's usually found in guitar amps. A spring reverb usually consists of a driver, metal spring, and a pickup housed in a tank. This little box. The signal is sent by the transducer across the spring, which modulates the signal and is captured by the pickup. The result is a bouncy type of reverb. Using multiple springs increases the diffusion of the sound. Another type of reverb that is commonly used is called a plate reverb. A plate reverb uses a large metal sheet suspended by springs inside a large case. In the middle of the plate, there's a transducer used to excite the plate, and further away there are two pickups. The energy created by the vibrations dissipates over time, creating a reverb effect. So it's just kind of like a little chamber that goes, rah. Next we have an echo chamber. This is not a device, but actually like a physical space. It's a room that's usually found in a basement of a recording studio, and it's used to add reverb acoustically to a sound. Echo chambers have a speaker that's placed at the end of the chamber. One or more microphones are placed along the length of the room, and then they pick up both the sound from the speaker and the reflections off the walls in the chamber. The farther away the loudspeaker is, the more echo and reverberation the microphones will pick up, and the louder the reverberations become because of the distance and the bouncing off the walls. Next we have digital reverbs. The first one is the algorithmic reverb. To emulate a reverb sound digitally, you will use multiple series of digital delays and filters to recreate that sound. The other digital reverb hardware that was used was the convolution reverb. It was a process used for digitally simulating the reverberation of a physical or virtual space through the use of software profiles. Basically what this means is that they will go to actual physical places where they would record this kind of reverb and then map it out digitally and then simulate it through the reverb hardware. Nowadays, you can find all these types of reverb as plugins that you can load onto your DAWs. Some common reverb parameters and vocabulary that you should learn when approaching a reverb include the early reflections. It's the first few reflections that bounce back to the listener from large primary boundaries in a given space. There's the reverberation tail. These are the last reflections that randomly arrive at the ears but are so closely spaced in time that the brain can't actually discern them as individual reflections, so they're perceived as one really slow decaying signal. You have decay time, or RT60. This is the time it takes for a signal to decay by 60 decibels, or how long the reverb will basically last. There's the pre-delay, which is an added delay after the original signal for the reverb to begin. It can make the signal seem closer or increase clarity. And then there's the size, which changes the room size perception and all related parameters. Cool, so those are the basics of reverb, and now let's get into delay. Alright, so delays are a type of audio effect which records an input signal to an audio storage medium and then plays it back after a period of time. So it's like if I go wah, and then it goes in, and then it goes wah again, wah again, wah again, wah. It repeats the sound after the sound is produced repeatedly until it fades away. I don't know what I'm saying. Originally, the first delays were created using tape loops, but over time became digitalized and then put into VSTs. Some common delay parameters and some vocabulary that you should learn about delay plugins are the delay time, which sets the amount of time the signal will be played by. There's the feedback, which will send the delayed signal back to the input to add additional repeats of the delay, so how much more repetitions the delay is going to do. There's the ping pong effect, which will pan successive repeats of the delay hard left and right, so it just pans it left and right. There's the filter, which is often a low pass filter, but sometimes it's a high pass filter, which will allow you to roll off the high end or low end of a delayed signal. This usually makes your delay sound more natural. Cool, that's kind of the basics of delay and reverb, and now we're gonna go into Ableton and mess around with it and show you guys how they work and what I just explained. Alright, so I'm gonna record some vocals and then we're gonna fuck around with the reverb first. Let's see how it affects audio. I can't sing very well, so I gotta sing something that's easy. I'm gonna show you guys how to use reverb. This is probably the worst thing I have ever sang along to, but I got to for YouTube. I gotta do it for YouTube. Okay, that's actually not the worst thing I've ever done. All right, let's touch on the early reflections first. These are the first reflections that you'll be hearing, so we can increase the amount from 2 to 55 on this one. So you can kind of tell. I'm gonna show you guys how to use reverb. So you can see how adding a larger amount of early reflections gives it like a larger sounding like space. All right, next we have our decay, or the RT60, which is the amount of time it takes for the signal to go down by 60 decibels. So for example, if we want the decay to really last a long time, we want to really hear that reverb for a long time, we can set it to 60 seconds. So it'll take the reverb 60 seconds to go down by 60 decibels. It just keeps going and going and going. Or if you wanted something really small, you could do 500 milliseconds to see how that affects it. You can barely hear it. All right, then we have our pre-delay, which it controls the delay time in milliseconds before the onset of the first early reflections. So let's see what this does. If I play it really quickly, it goes, and if I turn this down, it starts immediately. It's basically the amount of time it takes for it to start. All right, and now let's change the size. So again, this controls the size of the virtual room. If we turn it up, gives it a larger room, and if you turn it down, I'm gonna show you guys how to use reverb. So turning down this knob will actually give it a much more like colored and metallic feel. And if you turn it up, it kind of adds more space. It lets there be room for the reverberation to kind of flow through that space, that room. Another thing actually that I should note is oftentimes you're going to use reverb and delay as sends. And you can see that in Ableton, it actually does that already for you. And you're going to want to set the wet to 100% and then actually modify it on this knob here. I can do a video on send and return like signals if you guys would like. I'm gonna show you guys how to use reverb. This is probably the worst thing I have ever sang along to, but I got to for YouTube. I gotta do it for YouTube. All right, cool. And so now that we got a reverb, let's work on our delay. Delay, I think, is a little bit more straightforward. Let me turn up the knob to 100%, and you'll be able to tell immediately. Bam, 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 bam. There's a couple modes where we have repitch, fade, and jump for the Ableton stock one. Usually I like to go with a fade because it sounds like the delay is kind of fading away instead of pitching or jumping. Here's the filter right here. You can turn it on. It just allows certain frequencies to pass through the signal into the delay. I usually like to have it on a higher like frequency range just because you can pick it out more, but if you want to add more like depth to a sound, you're going to want to do a deeper one. And then high. Whatever you like. I like high personally. And then you have on Ableton stock, I don't know how it is on other stock plugins, but you have a beat division setting and it changes what beat the delay actually gets affected onto, and you can change it for left and right independently, or you can link them like this. I personally like to link them, and I usually go for like 6 or 4. It's a slower beat division. Or something like 2. Alright, so I'm going to use 4 for that, and then we have our feedback, which is the amount that each channel's output is fed back into its input. So if you have 95%, it'll put 95% of the original signal as the feedback like loop. So it's almost just as loud, and then it only gets like 5% quieter every time. So it's going to take a while for it to go down. 26. Fades a lot faster. Oh, and then there's like ping pong, which I mentioned earlier. If you're wearing headphones, you'll be able to tell really well. Which I kind of like the ping pong effect. We'll keep it. And then we're going to modulate the send. Alright, that's kind of it for reverb and delay. And this is my audio. Let's hear it. I'm gonna show you guys how to use reverb. This is probably the worst thing I have ever sang along to, but I got to for YouTube. I gotta do it for YouTube. That's it, guys. I hope you guys learned something. If you want more in-depth or specific ways to use these effects, comment it down below. If you guys got any questions or any other ideas that I could work on, hit me up. Let's do something. Adios.